I woke up at 1:43 a.m. to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. The room was dark, the kind of heavy, middle-of-the-night dark, where even the streetlight outside feels like a memory. I squinted at the screen, expecting a wrong number, or maybe one of those late-night spam texts. But it wasn't that. It was a message from an unknown number. Just 4 words. It's me, honey. At first, my half-awake brain didn't process it. I blinked, reread the text, felt my stomach twist. Honey. Nobody had called me that since I was 27 years old. Since before the accident. Since before Hannah, my sister. She used to call me Mikey or Honey, depending on her mood. She'd say it when she wanted something, or when she was teasing me for being too serious. Lighten up, honey, she'd laugh, pushing her hair out of her eyes. But Hannah had been dead for 25 years. Buried on a hillside outside of town, in a white coffin with lilies on top. I was the one who picked the coffin, the one who carried it, the one who identified her body when they found what was left of it. My first thought was that it had to be some sick joke, some scammer who got my number, maybe saw something on social media, though I'd long deleted any mention of Hannah. But then I noticed something. The way the message was written, no punctuation after me, no emoji, no follow-up, just, it's me, honey. That was exactly how she used to text me before smartphones existed, back when we had those old flip phones and you had to hit each key 3 times to type a letter. I sat up, my heart thudding so hard it felt like the bed was shaking. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. No photo, no name, just 10 digits that meant nothing. I typed back, "Who is this?" The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. I waited, staring at the screen, barely breathing. A minute passed. Then 2. Nothing. The room was silent, except for the sound of my own pulse in my ears. Finally, I set the phone down, but I didn't sleep again. I just sat there, watching the screen fade to black. The words, "It's me, honey," burned into my mind, like a whisper from a ghost. Hannah was 20 when she died. 20, and convinced the world owed her something. She had that kind of restless energy that made people fall in love with her and want to run from her at the same time. I was 27 then, already working long hours at the plant, already half married to responsibility. Hannah hated that about me. "You used to be fun," she'd say, rolling her eyes when I'd tell her to slow down, to be careful. That last night, the argument was stupid, like most of ours. She'd come by the house, hair wet from the rain, asking to borrow my car. I told her no, I needed it for work the next morning. And besides, she'd been drinking. She laughed it off, said I was overreacting, that she wasn't a kid anymore. I remember the way she looked at me from the doorway, like I was some stranger who didn't get it. "You used to trust me, Mikey." Those were the last words she said to me. A few hours later, a state trooper knocked on my door, the kind of knock that wakes up your bones. He said there'd been an accident on the Kettle River Bridge. My car. A young woman found inside. ID, said Hannah Cole. They said she must have lost control on the wet road, that the guardrail had given way, that the car went down 40 feet and caught fire. They said death was instant. I went to the site the next day. I can still smell the wet metal, the gasoline, the burned rubber. They found what was left of her in the driver's seat. I remember thinking, she must have been so scared. The guilt settled in that day and never left. 25 years later, I still see her face in my dreams, still hear her saying, "You used to trust me, Mikey." Every time something good happens, I hear it again, like she's asking if I'm allowed to be happy when she's gone. And now, after all these years, that same voice has come back to me in a text, just 4 words, but enough to split my life open all over again. By the time I finally drifted off, The sky was starting to lighten behind the curtains. I woke again around 6 a.m., heart still pounding from half-dreams that all blurred together into one. A ringing phone, a voice saying my name, a car crash echoing like thunder. I reached for the phone, not even sure why. Another message waited on the screen. You still live on Cedar Lane? I'm close. My breath caught. Cedar Lane. That was my address, not a guess, not some vague city mention, but exactly right. My throat went dry as I stared at it. The number was still the same, no name, no profile photo, nothing to trace. Just 10 plain digits. I clicked the info tab, hoping for some hint. A location ping. A clue. Anything. But it was blank. No linked email. No social media. No history. Like it didn't exist until now. I typed slowly, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Who is this? 3 dots appeared immediately, pulsing on the screen. Then, they vanished. I waited. 10 seconds. 30. Nothing. My mind started spinning through possibilities: a hacker, a prank, someone from the old neighborhood who knew too much. Or, something worse, someone who believed they were Hannah. I thought about calling the number, but the idea of hearing a voice, maybe her voice, on the other end, made my stomach twist. I set the phone down, stood up, and walked to the window. The street outside was quiet, the early fog lying thick over the houses. No movement, no headlights, just stillness. Then my phone buzzed again. I jumped, grabbed it, but it wasn't another message. It was just a calendar reminder I'd forgotten to delete: Hannah's birthday. She would have been 45 today. The coincidence made me feel dizzy. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline, waiting for it to light up again. It didn't. The last message just sat there on the screen. Those 8 words glowing in the dim light. You still live on Cedar Lane? I'm close. By morning, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. It had to be some kind of scam, or someone using an old data leak to mess with me. But that didn't explain the timing, or the nickname, or the birthday. I couldn't stop thinking about Hannah, about that text, about the way the typing dots had appeared, like someone was right there on the other side, unsure whether to speak again. Around 9, I got in my car and drove to St. Mary's Cemetery. I hadn't been there in months. I told myself it was to clear my head, but really, I just needed to see her name, to remind myself that she was still gone, that ghosts don't text. The gravel crunched under the tires as I pulled up to the old section, where our family plot sat beneath a cluster of bare maples. The air smelled of wet earth and cut grass. I walked to her grave, second from the end, white marble with her name carved deep. Hannah Cole, 1978. 1998. I froze. The ground looked wrong, uneven. The soil was dark and loose, like it had been turned recently. The maintenance crews usually kept this section neat, flat, tidy. But there were fresh clumps of dirt near the headstone, and one side of the grass looked peeled back. I crouched down, touched the soil. It was damp, cold, too fresh. I looked around, but the cemetery was empty, except for a caretaker in the distance, trimming hedges. A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the morning wind. I stood there for a long minute, staring at the disturbed earth, trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe they'd done drainage work, or added fertilizer. But there were no tools, no tracks, no sign of anyone working nearby. Just her grave. My phone was in my hand before I even realized it. I opened the messages, scrolled to the unknown number, and typed, "Why are you doing this?" I waited. Eyes on the screen. Nothing. I sent another. "Who are you?" No reply. I pocketed the phone and looked down one last time at the uneven ground. The sun broke through the clouds then, thin and pale. casting just enough light for me to see what I hadn't before: a small imprint in the dirt. A footprint. Fresh, adult-sized, pointing toward the road. I drove home from the cemetery with my hands locked on the steering wheel, knuckles white. The whole way back, I kept replaying what I'd seen: the uneven dirt, the single footprint pointing toward the road. By the time I got home, the unease had hardened into something closer to panic. I needed to hear another voice, someone who remembered Hannah the way I did. So, I called my mother. She was 83 now, living in a small assisted living home just outside of town. The line rang twice before she picked up. "Mikey?" Her voice was soft, worn thin with age. "Is everything all right?" I hesitated. "Yeah, Mom. Have you heard anything strange lately? About Hannah?" There was a long pause, the kind that makes the air feel heavier. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "She called me too, Mikey. Last night, from her old number." My heart dropped. "What do you mean she called you?" "Just what I said," she whispered. The phone rang around midnight. I almost didn't answer, but when I did, I heard her. Hannah. I swear, it was her. She said, "Hi, Mom," just like she used to. And then the line went dead. My throat went dry. "Mom, are you sure? It wasn't some recording or prank?" "I know my own daughter's voice," she snapped, the edge of the old fire coming back for a moment. "Don't tell me what I did or didn't hear." She started crying, then soft, hopeless sobs that made my stomach twist. I thought maybe it was a dream. "But the number's still on my phone, Mikey. You can check it." I drove to her facility within the hour. Her phone was sitting on the nightstand, still plugged into its charger. I opened her call log, and sure enough, there it was. Incoming call. 12:07 a.m. The number was almost identical to the one that had texted me, off by a single digit. But it wasn't Hannah's old number. Hers had been destroyed in the crash, burned with the rest of the phone. I'd seen it myself in the police photos. As I stared at the screen, the realization sank in like ice water. Whoever, or whatever, had reached out to me last night, had reached out to my mother too, and they knew exactly what number to use. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the grave again, the dirt, the footprint, the text glowing on my phone. By morning, I needed answers, real ones. So I drove downtown to the police headquarters, to the Records and Archives Department. It took a stack of forms, a fee, and 30 minutes of waiting under fluorescent lights before a clerk wheeled out a gray box labeled Cole, Hannah, 1998, Fatal, MVA. The box was dusty, edges frayed. I carried it to a corner desk and lifted the lid. Inside were brittle papers, photographs, and an official report bound with a rusted clip. The familiar details were all there: the date, the bridge, the rain, the guardrail failure. But as I read, small cracks began to appear in the story I'd believed for 25 years. The report said the vehicle was found completely burned out, the body inside unidentifiable by facial or visual means. Identification had been made through dental records, confirmed by a coroner named Dr. Charles Kessler. I'd never noticed the name before. Something about it nagged at me. I flipped through the pages, scanning the signatures, the attached photos. One image showed a scorched shell of a car, twisted metal and blackened glass. Another showed a white sheet over what was supposed to be Hannah. But the sheet didn't look like it covered a body. It looked too flat, too empty. I felt my pulse quicken as I dug deeper. The final page was a closure memo dated 6 months after the accident. Remains released to family. Case closed. Signed again by Dr. Kessler. I pulled out my phone and searched his name. Nothing recent. Then one old article popped up from 2002. Local coroner missing investigation. Ongoing. The article was brief, only a paragraph long. Kessler had vanished while under investigation for procedural irregularities in post-mortem identifications. He'd never been found. I sat back in my chair, the noise of the office fading into a distant hum. The body they'd buried 25 years ago. My sister's body had been identified by a man who disappeared 4 years later, under suspicion of falsifying autopsies. For the first time since the accident, I felt something I hadn't in decades. Doubt. What if Hannah's grave was empty? I couldn't let it go. After finding out about Dr. Kessler, I needed someone who'd actually been there the night of the crash. Someone who'd seen the car, seen Hannah, seen something real. I went back through the old reports until I found a name buried in the witness statements. Eddie Larkin, tow truck operator, called to recover the vehicle from Kettle River Bridge. The report said he'd confirmed presence of deceased occupant at the scene, but something about the phrasing, presence confirmed, not body seen, stuck with me. It was detached, clinical, and oddly specific. A quick search turned up a shop 2 towns over, Larkin's Auto and Salvage. I called, half expecting a disconnected number, but a gravelly voice answered. "Yeah, Eddie speaking." I introduced myself, told him who I was. There was silence on the other end. "Hannah Cole," I said softly. "You towed her car 25 years ago." A long exhale. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. I was hoping no one'd ever call about that again. I drove there the next morning. The shop was a mess of rusting parts and oil stains, the air thick with gasoline and regret. Eddie was in his 70s now, heavy-set, with hands that looked carved from stone. When I mentioned Hannah's name again, he rubbed his face and nodded toward the back office. "Let's not talk out here." We sat across from each other, the smell of coffee and motor oil hanging between us. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "The truth," I said. "Did you see her? In the car?" He stared at the floor for a long time before answering. "No," he said finally. "I didn't. My breath caught." "What do you mean? You didn't?" When I got there, the fire department had already put the flames out. The car was twisted to hell, half melted. They said there was a body inside, but I never saw it. No one did. They told me to keep my mouth shut, said it was for the family's peace. "Who told you?" "A cop. Can't remember his name now. Said the coroner would handle everything. I just signed the report and hauled the wreck to impound." He looked up then, eyes red, watery. "I've thought about that night more times than I can count. There was no smell of burnt flesh. You know? Just rubber and gas. I know what burned bodies smell like, son. That car was empty." The words hit like a punch to the gut. For 25 years, I'd believed I'd buried my sister. But if Eddie was telling the truth and I could tell he was, then whatever we put in that coffin wasn't Hannah. 2 nights later, the messages started again. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the old files spread out in front of me, when the phone buzzed. River Road. Unit 4, C. That was it. No greeting, no context, just an address. My first instinct was to ignore it, to hand everything to the police and let them deal with it. But something deeper pushed me forward. Curiosity, guilt, hope. I couldn't tell which. I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. I sat there, staring at the address for a full minute, heart hammering. Against every bit of logic, I grabbed my keys and left. River Road was on the edge of town, near the old industrial district. Rows of aging apartment buildings that looked more like warehouses. The place was half forgotten, windows boarded on some units, flickering lights on others. Unit 4C was on the 2nd floor. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The hallway smelled faintly of mold and cleaning chemicals. When I reached the door, I saw it wasn't fully shut, just slightly ajar. "Hello?" I called, my voice low. No answer. I pushed the door open, slowly. The apartment was dim, lit only by the gray spill of light from a cracked window. And then I heard it soft, almost imperceptible at first. A humming sound. A tune I hadn't heard in decades. Landslide. Hannah's favorite song. The sound was coming from deeper inside. Maybe the bedroom. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. "Hannah?" I whispered. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I stepped forward, the floorboards creaking underfoot. The air smelled faintly of lilac. Her perfume. She used to wear it every day. I reached the bedroom door and pushed it open. The room was empty. No one. Just an unmade bed, a half-empty glass of water on the nightstand, and that lingering smell of lilac hanging in the air like a memory. I turned slowly, scanning every corner. On the dresser was a photo frame face down. I picked it up. The glass was cracked, but behind it was a faded picture of two kids, me and Hannah, standing in front of our old house. My throat tightened. Someone had been there. Someone who knew us. And they wanted me to find this place. 3 days passed, without another text. And I started to think maybe it was over, that whatever game someone was playing had finally burned out. Then, on Thursday morning, I found a small brown package on my doorstep. No return address, no postage mark, just my name, scrawled across the front in blue ink. My stomach dropped when I saw the handwriting. I hadn't seen it in 25 years, but I'd recognize it anywhere. It was Hannah's. I carried the box inside like it might explode, set it on the kitchen table, and opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single USB drive and a folded note. The paper smelled faintly of lilac. "Play this alone," the note said. Same looping cursive. Same uneven pressure on the letters. My throat tightened. I looked around the room like someone might be watching, then plugged the drive into my laptop. A single file appeared. H.M. My hands hovered over the mouse for a long moment before I clicked. The screen went black, then flickered to life. A woman appeared sitting in a dim room, shadows cutting across her face. She looked older, maybe mid-40s, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The same eyes, same faint scar on her chin. My breath caught. It was Hannah, or someone who looked exactly like her. Her hair was shorter, uneven, like it had been cut in a hurry. Her skin pale and drawn. She looked terrified. "If you're seeing this," she said, her voice trembling, "they found me." She glanced over her shoulder, as if someone might burst into the room at any second. "I don't have much time. You need to stop looking, Mikey. Please. You were right about the bridge, about everything. They took me. I didn't die. Not really. But I'm not supposed to exist anymore." They made sure of that. The screen glitched, the picture warping for a second before returning. Don't trust anyone from before. Especially not him. If you see Dr. Kessler, run. Then static. The video ended abruptly. The screen freezing on her face. Eyes wide. Mouth slightly open, as if mid-breath. I just sat there, staring at it, unable to move. The sound of her voice still echoed in my ears. "If you're seeing this, they found me." I didn't leave the house for the rest of the day. I watched the video again and again, looking for clues, anything in the background that might tell me where she was. A bare wall. A single light bulb. A clock with no hands. Nothing. By evening, I pulled the old family albums from the attic, desperate to see her face the way it used to be. I flipped through pages of fading photos. Birthdays. Summers at the lake. Christmas mornings. And that's when I noticed it. A man. Always there. Always on the edge of the frame. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. An uncle, maybe, or a neighbor. But as I turned page after page, he kept appearing. Sometimes standing behind our parents. Sometimes crouched near Hannah, never smiling. Same face, same eyes. In one photo, Hannah's leaning against the fence outside our house, and there he is in the background, watching from the sidewalk. I looked closer, zoomed in on the image with my phone. The face was faint but familiar. I'd seen it before. I flipped back to the coroner's report and found the signature at the bottom. Dr. Charles Kessler, my father's old friend. I remembered him now, how he'd been at the house after the accident, sitting with my father in the study, voices low but urgent. I'd assumed he was just another doctor helping with the paperwork. But what if he'd been part of something else? My father had always called him Charlie, said he worked at the clinic downtown, the same clinic that had handled Hannah's autopsy. I found another picture, this one, of Hannah at her high school graduation. Behind her, near the bleachers, stood Kessler again, watching. Always watching. A cold realization crept over me. He hadn't just been my father's friend. He'd been following her. Maybe studying her. Maybe choosing her. The photos blurred as I flipped through them, my hands trembling. And then, I saw it, the last image in the album. Hannah, blowing out candles on her 20th birthday cake. And just over her shoulder, half shadowed by the doorway, was Kessler's face again. Only this time, he was smiling. After I saw Kessler's face in those photographs, I couldn't sit still. I needed to know who he really was, and how he'd been in our lives for so long without anyone questioning it. I started by tracing the address from the coroner's report, the one listed for Kessler's office in 1998. It wasn't hard to find. Most of the records were public. But when I pulled it up on the county database, the location didn't show a hospital. It showed an abandoned property. According to the documents, the site had once belonged to Cedar Brook Medical Research Institute, a privately funded facility that had been shut down in 2001 after a federal investigation. My stomach tightened as I read the summary. Subject of ongoing inquiry into unauthorized human trials, identity reconstruction, and memory experimentation. The words felt unreal, like something out of a conspiracy forum. But the more I dug, the worse it got. There were archived newspaper clippings, hidden behind paywalls and half-broken links. Stories about whistleblowers who'd come forward claiming patients were taken there after accidents. Their families told they'd died. The facility had supposedly specialized in neuro-recovery studies, but insiders said it was more like behavioral engineering, wiping identities clean and rebuilding them from scratch. The list of years active stopped in 2001, but one report mentioned missing patient logs from 1,998 through 1,999. Hannah's crash had been in September 1998. I felt a cold pulse of dread in my chest. I went to Google Earth, looked up the address, and zoomed in. The building was still there, or what was left of it. A gray husk on the edge of town, windows blown out, roof half collapsed. The street view image was time-stamped 2016. Someone had sprayed "no entry" across the front doors. I couldn't stop staring at the photo. If this was where Kessler had worked, then he hadn't just signed her death certificate, he'd erased her. The thought made my skin crawl. I thought of the video on the USB. Hannah's frightened eyes. Her warning, "Don't trust him." I opened my laptop again and searched for any record of my sister ever being admitted there. Nothing. No name, no patient number, no medical file. It was like she'd never existed. It was just after midnight when the message came through. I'd been staring at the map of Cedar Brook's ruins for hours, lost in the glow of the screen, when my phone buzzed beside me. Unknown number. The same one that had gone silent weeks ago. The text was short. I'm safe now. I remember everything. Meet me where the bridge fell. For a moment, I just sat there, staring. My first instinct was to call the police, to forward everything to someone else and wash my hands of it. But another part of me, the part that had missed her for 25 years, knew I was going. I typed back, "Hannah?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. I grabbed my jacket and keys, ignoring the voice in my head that told me this was insane. The drive to Kettle River Bridge took 40 minutes. But it felt longer. The road wound through the woods, fog hanging low over the asphalt. The bridge had been closed off years ago, condemned after the collapse, but the old access road still led down to the riverbank. I parked a few yards away and killed the engine. The night was silent except for the sound of the water moving below. I could see the remnants of the bridge, rusted metal beams jutting out over the river like broken ribs. I started walking, flashlight beam cutting through the mist. Every step echoed on the cracked pavement. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. Halfway across the old span, I stopped. "Hannah?" I called out. My voice disappeared into the fog. No answer. The air felt electric, charged with something I couldn't name. Then, faintly, I heard it, a soft humming. The same song from the apartment. Landslide. I turned slowly, scanning the darkness. "Hannah?" I said again, quieter this time. The humming stopped. From the far end of the bridge, a shadow moved, small at first, then clearer as it stepped into the moonlight. A figure. A woman. She paused, then said my name. "Mikey?" The voice was older, rougher, but still hers. Still Hannah. My knees nearly gave out. For a second, I couldn't breathe. 25 years gone, and there she was, or something wearing her face. The fog thickened around me like smoke. For a moment I thought my eyes were playing tricks, that the shape I saw on the far end of the bridge was just the mist folding into itself. But then she stepped closer, one hesitant foot in front of the other, until the beam of my flashlight caught her face. My breath caught in my throat. It was her. Older, thinner. Her hair cut unevenly around her jaw, but those eyes, Hannah's eyes, blue-gray and sharp, even through the exhaustion. Her face bore faint scars along her temple and neck, and her hands trembled as she clutched the railing for balance. "Mikey," she said again, her voice cracking. I froze. "Hannah?" It came out as a whisper. I started toward her, but she flinched back instinctively. "Don't," she said quickly. "Please. I just needed you to see me. What the hell is going on?" My heart was pounding, tears threatening, but held back by shock. "You died. I buried you. I saw the reports. They lied," she said, cutting me off. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. "I didn't die that night. I should have, but someone pulled me from the car before it went up. They said they could fix me, that I'd suffered head trauma and memory loss. They told me my family had been notified, that everything was being handled." She laughed bitterly, a sound like glass breaking. "It wasn't a hospital, Mikey. It was Cedarbrook. They didn't fix me. They took everything from me. My name, my past, my memories. For years, I was just a subject. I woke up every day as someone new. Different names, different stories. They made me write things, say things, react to faces they showed me. They said it was therapy, but it was control." I took a step closer, and this time, she didn't move away. The wind carried the smell of the river and the faint scent of lilac from her clothes. "How did you get out?" I asked. "There was a fire," she whispered. "They tried to move us. I ran. I didn't remember who I was until a few months ago. Fragments started coming back. You, Mom. The house on Cedar Lane. I've been hiding since then. Why now? I asked. Because they're still looking for me, she said, glancing over her shoulder toward the woods. And now they know you're involved. We sat on the riverbank until sunrise, wrapped in blankets of fog and disbelief. Hannah told me everything she remembered in pieces, her voice thin but steady. There had been other patients, people taken from accidents, overdoses, even hospice care. All declared dead, all quietly erased. The experiments were funded by private donors through shell foundations. The goal, she said, was to study adaptive memory reconstruction, how to rebuild identities from trauma. Some patients didn't survive. Others, like her, became long-term subjects. Kessler ran it, she said. But he wasn't the one who signed the original order to keep me there. She looked at me then, eyes red from crying. It was Dad. I blinked. That's not possible. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, worn at the edges. Inside were photocopied documents, authorization forms, fund transfers, correspondence. One line near the bottom stopped me cold. Sponsor: Richard Cole, private benefactor. My father. His signature was there, neat and confident, next to Kessler's. He told them to declare me dead, Hannah said quietly. He was funding the program. I don't think he meant for it to go this far. But when it did, he couldn't stop it without exposing himself. I sat there, staring at the papers, the river, reflecting the first light of dawn. He's been gone 12 years, I said finally. There's no one left to explain. He didn't just fund them, Mikey. He protected them. Every time someone got too close, he paid them off. He thought he was saving me, but I was a prisoner. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. When he died, the payments stopped. That's when things got worse. No oversight, no limits. Kessler went rogue. The silence that followed was heavy. Only the sound of the river filled the space between us. So what now? I asked. Do we tell someone? Go to the police? The press? Hannah looked at me, her eyes hollow. If we do, they'll come for us both. Cedarbrook wasn't just one facility. It was a network. They have people everywhere. Law, government, medicine. I've seen what happens when someone talks. She reached out, her hand cold in mine. We can expose them, or we can survive. But we can't do both. I didn't answer. The sunrise cut through the fog, turning the broken bridge gold. Somewhere, deep down, I already knew what she'd chosen. For a few days after that night on the river, I felt something I hadn't in years, a fragile, dangerous thing called hope. Hannah stayed with me for a while, sleeping on the couch, keeping the blinds drawn, always glancing over her shoulder like a hunted animal. We talked in fragments, filling in the missing years between us. She'd smile sometimes, a small, broken thing, when I reminded her of the songs she used to sing, or the way Mom used to burn pancakes on purpose, just because Hannah liked the crispy edges. But the more her memory returned, the more restless she became. She started pacing at night, standing by the window long after midnight. One morning I woke up, and she was gone. Her clothes, her bag, everything she'd brought, vanished. No note, no message. Just the faint scent of lilac lingering in the air. I told myself she'd be back, that she just needed space. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing. I reported nothing to the police. I couldn't. Who would I even tell? That my dead sister came back after 25 years only to disappear again? They'd think I'd lost my mind. 3 weeks later, just as I started to accept she was gone for good, my phone buzzed in the middle of the night. Unknown number. My chest tightened before I even opened it. Don't look for me. You saved me once. That's enough. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. A deadline. Disconnected. I wanted to be angry, to scream at the silence she'd left behind. But instead, I just sat there, phone in hand, and cried for the first time since I was 27. I don't know if she sent that message to comfort me or to warn me, but it was the last time I ever heard from her. A week later, I drove back to St. Mary's Cemetery. The morning was gray and still, the air heavy with mist. Hannah's grave looked different now. The soil that had been uneven and raw before was smooth, the grass neatly trimmed, the stone newly cleaned. Someone had been there. I stood for a long time without speaking, tracing her name with my fingers, like it might anchor her to this world. "Welcome home, Hannah," I whispered. The wind moved through the trees, soft and low, almost like a sigh. Then the silence returned, vast and endless. As I walked back to the car, I looked over my shoulder one last time. The grave shimmered in the morning light, and for a moment, I could swear I saw her standing beside it, watching me go, smiling that same old smile. Then the fog closed in, and she was gone. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.